Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. Today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast, we're journeying back to the American Revolution right here in Ohio. Joining us is Dante Weisend, the dedicated site manager of Fort Lawrence and the assistant site director for Historic Zoar Village here in Tuscarawas County, Ohio. Dante will share the compelling history of Fort Lawrence, give us an exclusive look at some of the exciting new archaeological discoveries that are currently underway there, and introduce us to a truly invaluable new resource, the Patricia, Hinkle, Shemanski Fort Lawrence Research Collection. Get ready to explore a pivotal piece of Ohio's revolutionary past with Dante Weisend. Well, Dante, thank you so much for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I'm sure it's a busy day for you.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Dante, if you don't mind, one of the questions I ask all of my guests, whether they're genealogists, historians, geneticists, or whatever, is I ask them what it is that got them interested in their field. So obviously you're a museum person, obviously a history person. What was it that got you so interested and excited about pursuing what you pursued?
Well, I attribute it most to growing up and hearing a lot of family history. My family is originally on my mom's side from West Virginia. And I attributed a lot of it to my great-grandfather, who I knew up until he passed away when I was 5. He was a World War II vet. I grew up on a farm that had historic buildings going back to the 1860s that we used as barns and things like that, and just around a lot of historic farm equipment. And that's really where I would consider it started, and it's just spread from there into all kinds of different concentrations in college, from Latin American history to European history during the Second Industrial Revolution. And finally, I landed somewhere in World War I as kind of my main concentration. But I'm, like most historians, I'm kind of all over the map with my interests.
But I can certainly relate to that. No worries about that. So talk to me a little bit about the history of Fort Lawrence. What's important about it? Why should people know? Why should they care? What is it about Fort Lawrence that makes it so important?
So Fort Lawrence is Ohio's only Revolutionary War fort built by the regular army. So in 1778, there was a lot of pressure on the western border of what would be of the fighting colonies, what would become the United States. I'll just call it the United States from this point forward, because we've declared independence 2 years ago by this point, from Native American raids sponsored by the British out of Fort Detroit. And so a plan is hatched by General Washington, who appoints General Lachlan McIntosh, partially because McIntosh is one of the few generals he has to spare, and partly because McIntosh needs a way to get out of Georgia because he had just murdered the governor of Georgia in a duel. So he gets assigned to what becomes known as the McIntosh Expedition, whose goal is to march from Fort Pitt and build a series of supply forts across western Pennsylvania, northern Ohio, and up to Detroit to eventually seize Fort Detroit. They build the first one, Fort McIntosh, at Beaver, Pennsylvania. And then as that fort is under construction, they march out with about 1,200 men following an expedition that had been done in 1764 by Henry Bouquet during Pontiac's Rebellion or Pontiac's War, and follow more or less the same path and end up where where Fort Lawrence is today after about 2 weeks, which it should have been about a 3-day march, give or take. And it took them 2 weeks, largely due to the condition of the pack animals being so poor, they could only move a couple miles a day. So they get there in November of 1778. They build Fort Lawrence in about 2 or 3 weeks. and then leave a garrison behind, and the rest march back to Fort McIntosh or Fort Pitt. And then over the next 9 months or so, until August of 1779, when the fort's eventually abandoned, they face a siege that gets them down to, I think, an ounce of flour and beef a day for their rations. At one point, they broil their moccasins to attempt to eat them because moccasins are made of leather. And it's just really a bad situation overall. And through this, they find out that supplying even Fort Lawrence, which isn't even a quarter of the way to Fort Detroit, is so hard and just not necessarily a waste of resources, but they can be used better elsewhere. And so the expedition is called off, and the troops march back to Fort McIntosh and Fort Pitt.
So when they arrive at the location of Fort Lawrence, now obviously there had been inhabitants there before. I know the Bolivar area of Tuscarawas
Mm-hmm.
County was there was a major indigenous city there at one point.
Yes.
So is that what they kind of discovered when they got there, or had that pretty well phased out by then?
I think the town that was north of what's today Bolivar was I I don't know enough about this part of it specifically, but I'm pretty sure it was mostly gone by this point because the soldiers at Fort Lawrence are basically alone. They have some people come up from Schonbrunn, some of the Christian converted Delaware Native Americans come up, the Lenni Lenape come up, and try to supply them. But for the most part, it's the Continental soldiers are blockaded by the British and other Native American forces for the time that they're there. They're mostly alone and kind of have to fend for themselves without a ton of outside help.
So when did the Fort Lawrence Museum become a reality then?
It was built in the early 70s for the bicentennial. So it that's when the first round of archaeology and when that museum was built, and when the Fort Lawrence Park became host to the museum, and moving forward from that 50 years or so, as that bicentennial's really shaped what we've been like for the last 50 years.
Okay. And there were some discoveries made then, and some interesting artifacts that came out of that original discovery. But I also understand that you're starting to do archaeology on the site again now, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I think the most interesting thing that was found out about the fort in the first round of archaeology is that we actually had the location off by about 100 yards. They built them. So visitors today will know the museum is built with part of it on top of the actual fort. And the reason it was done that is they thought the fort was a bit further north than where it is now. Basically, the northern wall of what we know today as the fort was thought to be the southern wall. So bicentennial, they were really rushing to get it done, and they discovered a lot of really good information, but they did stuff like build a museum on top of the outline. So, good news, we know where the fort is now. Bad news, the museum's right next to or on top of it. So,
So what's the
um,
hope with the new archaeology that you're doing? Is it to kind of expand your understanding of the fort and its environment? Is it to find more artifacts? Is it to reconstruct the fort? What's kind of the end game with it?
it's all of the above. So the archaeology that was done in the past was very good, but there are some buildings and some areas of the fort we'd like to know more about before eventual reconstruction. And one of the things that wasn't done was properly screening the dirt. So what they're going to do now is be much more methodical. They're doing it with enough time that they're not in a rush like they were back at the bicentennial. So they're going to very carefully uncover the uh, the fort, at least where they're digging, and comb it for as many artifacts as possible to be able to enhance our story of the people who were there, and then look for better building foundations, see if there's a way we can better map out how the interior of the fort looked. All of this with the goal in mind of partial reconstruction of Fort Lawrence.
When you do that, I mean, Dante is a history person and myself as well. We've visited probably numerous fort museums.
Mhm.
What's the when you once you reconstruct all of that, once you've got all the information, is it just to have the physical structure there, or is there a plan to interpret that site, to grow it as a historic site?
So I think part of the hope is that the reconstruction is some of the growth that will happen because it's right now we have the small museum and it works fine, but it will be a lot better to be able to show people what the fort looked like than tell them that mulch outline outside is where the fort was. So the actual interpretation of it is we're ongoing. We're still developing that internally. Um, but yes, the goal is to be able to use it in an interpretive way for reenactments, for educational purposes, all of the above. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Noel Poirier here, Executive Director of the Ohio Genealogical Society and your host for the Ohio Roots podcast. Did you know you can help preserve the past and empower the future? Your donation to the Ohio Genealogical Society helps protect vital family history records and supports research for generations to come. Visit www.ogs.org/donate and give today. Thank you so much for your support. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening. Now, I was just going to say it's interesting because we're talking about kind of a couple things today. Thank you. While you're here, one is it's interesting because the archaeology is going to tell us a lot, and tell you a lot about the physical nature of the site, about how the site was used and where things were that were used for the site. So that's great. But then you also have the addition of this new collection that has come in that will allow you then to also interpret the people, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have it here, the Patricia Hinkle Shemanski Fort Lawrence Research Collection, which is down at the Tusk Historic Society, um, which is a fairly, at this point, comprehensive list of people who served on the Macintosh expedition and took part in building Fort Lawrence. And part of our hope is not only is mainly to use it as a resource to tell the stories of the soldiers, and so that if people out there have an ancestor, they can look up, hey, I want to know, did this person actually serve at Fort Lawrence? Let me, like everyone does, type this person's name into Google and see what pops up, or go to the Fort Lawrence website and see a list of names and be able to search those list of names to see a person's there. And then if they need any further documentation, we can direct them down to the Tusk Historic Society, to see the actual physical paperwork that they have.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to kind of my next question. I had the pleasure to meet with you and with Kim at the Tuscarawas County Historical Society this morning to kind of look at the collection and kind of see what's in it, and it's pretty impressive. I mean, there's a lot of information there, and I heard in your conversation, your statement there a bit, that you might put a list of people on the website. Is there an idea to at some point, where possible, because not everything that's in that could be digitized. I think some of it might be under copyright, but is there an idea on your end as part of this interpretation and part of this change to make all of the immediate that information available online, or simply the list of the names?
I think ideally, if we lived in an ideal world, it would be everything digitized in a type of online archive for people. We're going to start small with just the names, which our
I
support
think that's pretty
organization.
huge, though, Dante.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
don't minimize that.
you
I think
know,
that's a huge deal to add the names.
yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, all of this is caveated with it's a list of 1,200 plus names potentially. So, take it with a grain of salt when I say start small. Um, our support group, the Friends of Fort Lawrence website, has a list of a lot of those names on it, and it's served us really good so far. But I'm always of the opinion the more that the correct information is out there, the better. So I think if we can keep it on both of our websites to be a two beacons is brighter than one, basically, so that people, if they're looking for the information, come across either of our sites, they're able to get the information that they need.
Do you know, and you may not know the answer to this, but what motivated Patricia Hinkle Shemanski to document this material and collect it? Was she a descendant herself of somebody at the fort?
I'm not entirely sure. A lot of this was done well before my time here at Fort Lawrence, so I can't really comment on what her drive was, but I mean, it was obviously a big enough drive for her to spend over a decade researching all of this. And I mean, it fills up five chock full file boxes worth of information, as you saw, and could probably be uncondensed into a sixth if Kim had the room for it down there. But it's we're extremely lucky to be able to get that collection from someone who was that passionate and thorough about it, about the research.
Yeah, I mean, I when I looked at it today, just reviewing the four boxes that I looked at, um, she's color coded each of the individuals in the listing in the files, whether they helped build the fort, whether they were simply at the fort, what their role was
Mhm.
in relations to Fort Lawrence. I mean, you have essentially a resource there that could have been used or could continue to be used or still be used to write a really extensive history of the fort.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if once we get it all understood, how, understand the collection, yes, there's 1,200 stories to tell there. So there's no telling what kind of information we could dig up about the personal experience of serving at Fort Lawrence from this collection once we really get the time to dive into it.
Yeah, as I looked at it again today, the more I thought about the idea that there are people out there who are researching their ancestors, and one of their ancestors may be in that file box, and they may have
Mhm.
more information on that person than what Ms. Shemansky was able to gather. So it seems like it's a project that will continue to grow and enlarge. And that may make Kim unhappy because she might have to get more space for it. But it just seems like it's a project that's going to kind of be out there for a long time and continue to grow.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know this better than anyone, but even in my personal kind of dabbling in family genealogy, you start with one goal in mind of finding one thing or one person, and then it just snowballs endlessly from there. And, we're looking at, a, hundreds of family trees potentially in this that we could get information. I mean, like you said, someone could turn up that says, hey, I have so and so's journal, and he spends 10 pages talking about his service in the Macintosh expedition in Fort Lawrence. You never know what you'll find now that we have a collection like this once we can make it public.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Once you make it public and people know that they can go and see the list and find perhaps one of their ancestors and confirm a family story or refute a family story, even perhaps. It
Hmm.
sounds like there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up for Fort Lawrence in general. When somebody
Yeah.
drives out to Fort Lawrence and just wants to pay a visit, what are the things that are going on now? What are the things they could see, say, in the summer of 2025?
Yeah. So right now, we of course have the museum open. It's $6 a person to go in and see. And in there it's about a 45 minutes or so visit, depending on how in depth you get with looking at the displays and things in there. But it tells the story of Fort Lawrence pretty well. And then of course we have a huge park that people are more than welcome to come out and visit. We have the fort outline, which you can view in the ground and walk around to get an idea for how large the fort was. It's about an acre, give or take, square. And then we have a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which a lot of people don't know. It has the same honors as the Tombs of the Unknown in Washington, D.C. We just can't afford a 24-hour guard for it. Um, so I would highly recommend visiting that. And then new this summer is we have the archaeology team from the Ohio History Connection are getting ready in the next week or two. Because, and I only caveat that because of the rain that's coming for about a week straight right now, to open up pits in the ground and start the exploratory archaeology for the eventual reconstruction. So you'll be able to visit and see the archaeologists working. Now, obviously, don't get too close. These are going to be several feet deep pits, but you'll be able to see and talk to the archaeologists about the work, excuse me, about the work that they're doing. And every other weekend, I'm not sure when this is starting yet, but there will be public archaeology days where the public can come out and do some real basic stuff, like maybe sift dirt for artifacts, something small that gets the public involved and can help spark that interest in the future generations, and see what being an archaeologist is like, because unfortunately being an archaeologist is not running around the world with a whip and a handgun. I mean, some might do that, but none of the ones I've met so far have.
And none of the ones that'll be at Fort Lawrence.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Well, Dante, it just sounds like there's so much neat stuff coming up, and with the America 250 thing coming up, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today to talk about Fort Lawrence and its importance and some of the great work you guys are doing over there. I'm sure our listeners will really love to hear about it, and they'll keep an eye on your website so that they'll be able to see when you start making some changes. So Dante, thank you so much for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time.
Oh, you're welcome, Noel. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.
I want to thank Dante for joining me today to discuss all the exciting things happening at and around the Fort Lawrence Museum. Getting the opportunity to view the archaeological work this summer is not something you'll get to see every day, so you should definitely try to take advantage of that. If you want to learn more about the Fort Lawrence Museum, you can visit their website at fortlawrencemuseum.org. Thanks to Dante, and thanks to you for listening to this episode of the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. Curious about your family's Ohio past? The Ohio Genealogical Society is your gateway to uncovering generations of family history. Whether you're a seasoned researcher or just starting your journey, the OGS offers expert resources, local chapters, exclusive online records, online and in-person programs, and a passionate community ready to help you. Join today and bring your family story to life, because your family's history matters. Visit ogs.org to start your discoveries.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.